Good evening, I'm Ashok and welcome to Global Lens. Tonight is a special half hour highlighting our first season of Global Lens. Stay with us. Tonight is a special celebration of our first season of Global Lens, and we're going to select 4 of our highlight shows to share with you tonight. First one of Deepak Chopra, one by Bowman, another with Russell Paul, and the third one on Oasis of Peace, a fascinating program. But first I'd like to just remind us what the idea of Global Lens is. Literally, we're trying to open the global lens for our viewers to really understand a very different worldviews and perspective across the borders on the planet, which has become very important for our cultural sustainability at this time. We all hear about globalization, of course, and we usually think about economics and transnationals and technology across the planet, but we often don't think about globalization in terms of the global village of cultures and worldviews coming together. And we all know right now that this is fundamental to learn the skills of crossing our worlds. So, Global Lens is intended to help our viewers appreciate other worldviews and perspectives across the spectrum. And so tonight we're going to really go to Deepak Chopra to start this off. I was able to get Deepak to come here because I'm working with him in his work around the planet to awaken global consciousness, and I wrote a blurb for his new book, Pieces Away, and this brought him here to Philly Live. We had him for a 1-hour special, and so we're going to share this with you. One of the highlights on Global Lens.
I talk about 7 practices, and in a way that is drawn from Buddhist thought, being peace, thinking peace, feeling peace, speaking peace, acting peace, creating peace, and sharing peace. Right. That if we can shift our consciousness, those are the daily activities of our consciousness, and consciousness simultaneously differentiates into what we call cognition or knowing, perception of what we perceive as the world out there, moods and emotions, which we feel here as our feelings and desires, social interactions, and the environment, biology, and even the forces of nature. They're all inseparably a single phenomenon differentiating into these different expressions. Now, differentiation is not separation, and yet sometimes it appears these are separate phenomena, but they're not.
They need to be fragmented. They could still be integral.
Yes, I mean, just like your eyes and your heart and your nose and your gonads are differentiated expressions of DNA.
One organism.
So, and the same DNA differentiates into all these, and they're part of an organism.
So you're almost looking to the resource of the global wisdom, the great ancient traditions, as a template for your prescription.
I am looking to the great wisdom traditions, but I'm also seeing that that's where science is taking us. That science is taking us to a new understanding of our selves, that there is no such thing as, in Buddhism, they said there is no such thing as a separate self. And today, one of the favorite expressions of Buddha was, we are interbeings that interarise in the inter-isness. That, if you start to define somebody, you end up defining relationships. That a human soul is a confluence of context, meanings, archetypal themes that all derive from relationship. Ultimately, there's no such thing as a thing. There's only relationship. My body is recycled earth, my thoughts are recycled information, my emotions are recycled energy, my personality is recycled relationships, and ultimately, at the level of soul, I'm a reflection of all other souls.
Right, and it seems that from this great resource of wisdom across East and West, North and South, there's a recognition that we shape our worlds, don't we, by our consciousness. Again, consciousness shapes our living reality.
Absolutely. I mean, consciousness projects. If I'm in the survival or fight-flight mode, then I create a world of danger. I create a world of basic survival where I'm only coping, and where the only way to get what I want is through fighting or fleeing. Right. On the other hand, if my consciousness is more contextual and relational and holistic and nurturing, then I see that, for my very being, I have to look at everything else. Even as I see nature, I see that those trees are my lungs. If they didn't breathe, I wouldn't breathe.
So in a real sense, the wisdom of the ages is that the heart of violence is not only in the physical acts, but in the mentality and intention of how we're using our minds.
Yeah, it's in ignorance, really. In the Eastern traditions, we would say avidya, which is the whole idea that there is an isolated, single entity that I call me or mine. In order to define me or mine, I have to describe the whole universe.
And in that case, then, to overcome the deep roots of violence in the grooves of our consciousness and our life, your practices, your 7 practices, are they meant for everyday people?
Yes. In fact, I've created a website now. It's called peacepractices.org, where you come and join and create global communities of peace practices and peacemakers, in the hope that we can create that critical mass of peace consciousness that will allow us.
Well, that was a special 1-hour interview with Deepak, and we had wonderful responses from you. At the end of each episode, we ask you for feedback, and some of you write us on a regular basis. I want to personally thank Harrison for writing us and his insights on our topics, and I'd like to share one of his letters here in response to this show. He says, "All I can say about your program with Deepak Chopra is stellar, stellar, stellar. What a coup to have him as our guest. I'm familiar with his old PBS series and the many articles about him in the news, but you made him come to life not only as a deeply important influence in this world who is sincere in his endeavors, but as one who can make a difference. You were brilliant in bringing up business leaders towards the end of the conversation as a key in the shift of the human evolution discussed. I personally don't have much faith in humankind to prevent its own destruction, but this program gave me some uplift with Chopra's and your own optimism. Keep up the good work in producing the best show on TV in this genre." That's Harrison. Another viewer wrote, and this is Miriam, "This is great interview, the best. More, more, more. Thanks." And still another, this is G. Schreier, who said, "How sorry I am when I found out that I missed the first half hour of your show featuring Deepak. He is such an inspiring person, and I look forward to seeing him every time he's interviewed on TV. I only hope that the show is aired again so I can see it in its entirety. I also wish that political leaders throughout the world would all sit down and listen to him too." And we get this kind of request often to have our segments repeated for people who happen to miss it. We really appreciate your voices on this. We're now going to go to Carol Bowman, who is the second show we'd like to highlight tonight. This is amazing. Carol Bowman is a best-selling author, bringing to the attention of the planet, really, the question of children's past lives. That's a topic, or the title of one of her books. And she's been featured on certain national TV shows, and she's been on Oprah. And that she really, she got into this in terms of her own children, discovering that they really had issues and memories that were coming up. And so she did profound research on this. And so we're going to show you a clip from Carol Bowman.
James Leininger was 2 years old. He started having nightmares about 4 times a week that his plane was crashing. He would wake up screaming and flailing and say that his plane was crashing. And his parents were puzzled by his statements and behavior, but wrote it off to nightmares. But this went on for about 9 months. And as it happened, James's grandmother heard about my first book, Children's Past Lives, and had read it and suggested to her daughter, maybe James is having some kind of past life recollection of his plane crashing. So using the information that I gave in the book, the mother of James, Andrea, started to talk to him as he was having these nightmares, encouraging him to talk about them. Mm-hmm. Your plane is crashing. Well, what happened? Well, it was shot down. And he would start revealing more of the story. And he revealed an amazing story about his plane being shot down. And when they asked him, he said the Japanese. And this is a 2-year-old who had absolutely no exposure to
Now, I know skeptics might want to say, explain it away always, and suggest that he picked it up or was prompted and so forth. What's the response to that?
Well, this was a 2-year-old with a stay-at-home mother whose only exposure to television was Barney and Sesame Street. So she knew what he'd been exposed to. So she was very shocked when he started talking about this. Plus, the emotions in the nightmares were very compelling. You know, where did that come from? So they didn't really know what to think for a while, but they noticed that after Andrea talked to James about his nightmares and about the fact that he was shot down in his plane, the nightmares stopped.
Why? What would that be?
Well, there's more to the story, but I think that once these past life memories are acknowledged, or the children are allowed to talk about them with someone who does acknowledge the experience as a reality, it is real to the child, it helps them move through it. It helps them move through the experience. And quite often, as in James's case, children have memories of traumatic events in past lives where they died.
It affects them in this life.
Exactly. As a trauma would affect us in this life, past life memories affect children.
So it needs to be
in the same way. Right. So after the nightmares went away, James started talking about his life as a World War II pilot. And he told his parents that he flew a Corsair. He remembered the name of his aircraft carrier.
That's unbelievable.
Yes. And the father, who was totally skeptical, started doing research to disprove what his child was saying. He said, no, this can't be right. There has to be some other explanation. But as he checked each point of research on the internet, he found that there was an aircraft carrier called the Natamo Bay, which James had said.
Wow.
And he was able, over the course of 2.5 years, actually establish James's identity in his previous life.
Wow.
And found out that there was one person who was killed in the Natamo Bay precisely as James described it, and his name was James Houston. And he died in 1945, and he did fly a Corsair, as James had said. And James is now 6. This started when he was 2, and he is still having very vivid recollections of that lifetime, but as he's moved through time, they've also resolved. He actually had the opportunity to meet the sister of James Houston, who would have been his sister in his previous life, which is quite phenomenal. Right. And he seems to be moving through the experience and seems to have found some peace with it. So he came into this life traumatized. He was only 21 years old when he was killed in his previous life in a mission over Iwo Jima. So there was a lot of unfinished business for him. So apparently this is not uncommon that children come into this life with unfinished business from previous lives, and sometimes they just need to...
Well, Carol Bowman went on to really develop this in terms of her own children and many other cases, and it was amazing. We got a lot of feedback on that one, and I'd like to share a couple with you. One of our viewers said, today, purely by accident, I was channel surfing. I came across your show with Miss Bowman concerning past life memories of children. It was really interesting, and it inspired me to do some research on this, including read Mrs. Bowman's book. Now, I don't believe in this type of thing, but as Confucius admonished us to do, I'm willing to keep an open mind about these things. And that's written by Steve. Another viewer, this is Harrison again. Tonight's program was fascinating. Ordinarily, I would not do this except that I have a sister in this category of those discussed in the program. I also have a book written by my college roommate, who's a prominent physician who's written on this. Thank you for such interesting programs. I like your new formatting. Keep up the excellent work. And that's Harrison. Now let's go to our third selection, which is the Yoga of Sound with Russell Paul, one of the eminent presences on the planet, combining yoga and sound. He's really world known, and that's the title of his book. For me, this was one of the highest because I think he and I reached together a deeper understanding and helped our viewers, I think, and we got good feedback on this, understand the deep connections between sound and yoga and transforming consciousness and healing. So let's take a look at Russell Paul's selection.
Chishtarajam brahmanam brahmanaspata adashram vannuti bhisita sadhanam Om Mahagana.
Oh, it's so powerful. I mean, I could just listen to that for all through the show.
All right.
But let's talk. Let's keep our voices at that vibration. Yeah. Sure. That's a mantra, isn't it?
That is a mantra.
Explain to our viewers, what is going on in this?
Well, this is a particular type of mantras. Yeah. Mantra is a broad term to speak. I like to think of mantras as the language of energy.
Oh, okay.
And mantras is to yoga the same as what mathematics is to science.
Ah.
It's the very heart, the very foundation. It's the language of yoga, which is the language of energy. So, but what mantras do is that they could be conceptual. Certain types of mantras, like these Vedic mantras, are conceptual.
What were the words? Sanskrit words.
Sanskrit words,
And
invoking Ganesh,
Ah.
who is the one who removes obstacles. This is a very powerful mantra.
Is it a prayer? Is it a kind
It is a kind of a prayer.
Yes, I see.
Yes, mantras could be short prayers. They could also be single syllable sounds, or they could be single syllable sounds strung up together. And there's a science behind it
Right.
in constructing them.
Right.
It comes from this culture that gave us yoga, and the same culture that gives us Ayurveda, the world's
Right.
oldest medical system.
All right. I want
So
to get into those topics
Good.
as we unfold, as this gets enriched. But so if it's energy, if
Yes.
it's an energy transformer, when someone is properly reciting the mantra,
Yes.
what is it transforming? Is it transforming my energy, or is it opening space to Ganesh? What is exactly being transformed?
Well, definitely we're working with ourselves. We're working with ourselves, we're working with our own energy. And these are sounds that have been intelligently sculpted. Samskrita, which is the language of mantra,
Right.
means well produced, well constructed.
Right.
So it's well constructed sound, a sound form that has certain effects. And the effects are physical, the effects are psychological, the effects are spiritual. So they're on many, many levels of being. And so they have been designed in a certain way to produce certain effects, to cause the brain to emit certain specific wavelengths, to put ourselves in a certain place. So it's about disposition, openness, release, channeling, facilitation, and therefore healing.
Oh, wonderful. Now, in terms of that moving of energy, make the link between the mantra and moving energy and yoga, because yoga is supposed to connect us with the universe in a
Yes.
profound sense. What's going on here in the mantra and the yoga?
Mantras and yoga have always been very closely associated. In fact, sometimes people speculate which came first, the posture or the mantra.
I see.
Mantras were often partnered with yoga postures. They were the power behind the pose, so to speak. They fueled the pose, they fueled the energy they provided.
Well, that was one of my favorite for the season, and I felt a real rapport with Russell Paul in that conversation. So, several of my colleagues really responded very positively. One in ethnomusicology suggested that this helped him bring connections that he never understood before, and was very appreciative of that. Some of my students use it in their term papers, writing about yoga and sound and combining the different aspects of that with healing, so that it really had quite a reverberation. I think it's a good example of what Global Lens means, really, to open up into a different world and help our viewers appreciate it from the inside and get a better internal sense of it. So thank you for your comments on this one as well. And so we're now going to go to our fourth selection, which I think puts us in a different place. This is one, the Oasis of Peace, a bold experiment right in the heart of Israel, with two communities, Israelis and Palestinians, coming together to actually live in peace in the midst of all of the violence that surrounds them. And two of the guests among three, Michal Zak, who's an Israeli woman, and Abdusalam Najjar, who is a Palestinian family, both leaders who have co-founded this community, are in conversation in this piece. We'll share this with you now.
Because you can have dialogue between an oppressed and an oppressor, and nothing changes in the relations. For me, it's not the dialogue itself that's important, but if it can create any kind of change in the way that people see themselves and their role in the conflict and how they see the conflict. So to make a dialogue that could be effective, that could change something, that's the question, whether that could be done. And that's not a very easy thing to do, I think, because people are not easily, do not easily move out of their present role as being the oppressed or the oppressor or the majority or the minority, or whichever terms you use. It's very hard to be self-criticizing and to see how you're behaving in the conflict.
Yeah, so that if there's such an imbalance of power between the majority and the minority, and you need some kind of a trust to have real dialogue, if you're going to have a community of peace, you have to work for it. So, Al-Islam, help us understand that. What is the nitty-gritty work that has to be done?
The first trust you should create is you should trust yourself and your abilities that you can achieve, and you have the ability to change something. And as belonging to the minority or to the oppressed side in our reality, my way is to bring my people to be aware and to raise their own consciousness about the situation that they are on, and just to help them not to behave from being the oppressed and not being the victim, and to try to gain some kind of empowerment. There are a lot of resources of empowerment that you will enable yourself, that you will relate to the other side, to the oppressor, from the position that you are equal, and not waiting until the other side will let you or will give you or something like that. You should create a situation that the other side has no choice unless to relate to you as an equal. Right. By this equal position, you liberate yourself as being the oppressed and help the other side to be liberated from being the oppressor. Only from that time, from that position, the dialogue will be more constructive. The dialogue will be that both sides will take responsibility to any agreement between the both sides for the future. This way, it's not easy process. It's very, very difficult process, because if I will wait until the other side, the oppressor, will liberate me, there is no sign in the history at all that an oppressed liberate the oppressor or did something, helped him to come out from his position. Right. And this is the way that we are saying this in Wahat al-Salam Neve Shalom. We are sitting together, we are taking responsibilities, we are sharing the power resources.
Well, you can see this was a very intense conversation and dialogue on dialogue itself and the importance and power of dialogue to really help bring the conditions of peace. That's a bold experiment, and it really speaks to so many conditions across the planet now. And the reactions I got to that one was amazing, because people realize that here are two sides that were surrounded by violence and war, in this bold experiment of living in an oasis of peace and attempting to achieve real dialogue. And what you saw there was Mikhail saying, when the side that has power sees itself as having superior power, the challenge is to face that and really enter into dialogue. And on the other side, Abdusalam is pointing out that the side that is disadvantaged, so to speak, has to really take responsibility on its own to empower themselves and not wait for the oppressor, so to speak, to empower them. Very powerful and profound points. And our fifth section is going to be on Marilyn Schlitz, Dr. Marilyn Schlitz, talking about medicine, the revolution in medicine, which was another high point on Global Lens this year. And in this we have several selections from her book called Consciousness and Healing, which features about 40 selected people, leaders, health practitioners around the nation, who are participating in a profound revolution in medicine, integral medicine. And we're going to listen to her now speak, and one quote from one of the doctors will be here. Let's check this.
We are alive at a unique moment in human history. Never before have so many worldviews, belief systems, ways of encountering reality come together. And nowhere do we see this more clearly than in the case of medicine, where on the one hand we have tremendous successes of technology and science in the Genome Project, in a variety of different kind of surgical interventions. And at the same time, we see that there are profound limits to that kind of model. And on the other hand, we now have access to the world's religious and spiritual traditions, traditions that don't draw a separation between healing and that sense of the sacred. So this integral model is really about connecting all the various elements of what works as we try to promote and build a more compassionate and sustainable model of health and healing.
Yeah, but people feel, when their life and death is an issue with medical, you don't want to fool around. You want the best science. And there has been traditionally a rift between science, hard science, and religious spiritual views that you're referring to, that these are the world views. So how does integral medicine, this new model that's emerging, attempt to bring those together in a real way?
Right. Well, we're really calling for a transformation in the way that we train people to become medical professionals, the way that health consumers seek to empower themselves in their own process. The integral approach is really one that is a whole system. It recognizes the importance of the first person, that subjective sense of self, that sense of identification when you don't feel well or you feel perfectly well, that first person perspective. With then the second person perspective, which is our intersubjectivity, our relationships.
Between doctor and patient,
people,
for example.
between our society, between the institutions that hold us,
Right.
as well as then the third person or objective, scientific perspective. So
Right.
this integral lens that we're calling for is really an attempt to transform sort of the basic foundation in which we hold the model of healthcare, to acknowledge all the multiple dimensions of who we are as we approach life and death.
Well, it's amazing. It really makes me wonder whether, that our medical schools where we're training our young physicians, whether they're being able to pick this up or not. We'll get to that. But we have a clip from one of the voices in your wonderful book,
Excellent.
and we're going to share that with our viewers right now.
Great, thank you.
Noetic to us is the realm where there's not a tangible pill or device, or in fact, frequently it's not clear what it is, what the compassion or the love or the spirit or the energy or the chi but noetic to us is a wonderful term as an umbrella to exactly those areas. And we realized, on a busy day, I'll be running in 5 different directions, and I've been cathing a long time. I think I have reasonable skills, but who do you want pushing catheters in your mother? An experienced cardiologist who has a whole team coming after him, 2 pagers going off, grants due, or the same cardiologist to just stop for a minute before he walks in the cath lab and let all that go. We started doing that with a wonderful little prayer called the Physician's Prayer from Mother Teresa. No matter how busy the day, before I walked in the cath lab, we would stop and just read through this prayer. It wasn't fancy, but it divided the cath lab space from everything else in the day. How far reaches it to have everyone stop for 60 seconds once the patient's on the table, simply to remember how much trust that person is putting into our hands. 60 seconds a case.
Very powerful. So we have 5 selections and highlights for you from Global Lens. We had Deepak Chopra, Russell Paul, Carol Bowman, Oasis of Peace, and now Marilyn Schlitz. Very different topics, and just the tip of the iceberg for this year. We've talked about business leadership and global responsibility, global citizenship, economic trends, aging trends on the planet, ecology, and so many other topics. And as diverse as they are, they all seem to really talk about opening up the lens of consciousness so people can understand different cultures. Very important here at WYBE, because as you know, WYBE focuses on real diversity and community building, real community, and really will add real dialogue. And to really have the skills of dialogue across different worldviews is vital now in this time for us on the planet. So we're very happy that Global Lens can contribute. And so we're very happy. Thank you so much for watching and for writing. As you can see, we appreciate your voice. And you could write us here at WYBE at talkshows@wybe.org. And for more information on our programming here across all of the programs, you can have us wybe.org. For Global Lens, I'm Ashok. Thank you for watching. Have a great evening.